Okay. Okay. So, hi everyone. We have with us Dr. Sadique, who is joining from Zurich, Switzerland, and uh, me and him are meeting after quite a long time. But of course, we had apart from academic engagement, we had a lot of other activities in which we were involved. And I was quite looking forward to this interaction because I'll get to learn a lot of things, of course, during this session and beyond that. As of now, he works in the artificial intelligence area and with a prominent organization. He's based out of, he's working as a vice president and he's based out of Switzerland. So thank you, Sadiq, for joining us. Welcome
Thank
to
you,
you.
Siddhartha. It's a pleasure.
And I was saying that he is still, so I know him from his very soft-spoken nature, always a smiling face, and always calm, and he always keeps very calm composure. So it is good to see that he still has it. So Sadi, going forward, what led you to choose after your studies at IIT Kharagpur? What led you to choose Europe? Usually people go to US, but you landed up primarily in Europe. Of course, bit of stint you had in US, but what was the thing which led you to be there?
It's a funny story of incompetence that led me there. So, as you know, US requires you to do a GRE exam. For most admissions, you require GRE. And I was never too serious in its preparation when I was in Kharagpur. So I did the exam. I was completely underprepared, and I got a very shitty score.
Okay.
Um, so that incompetence led me to go, maybe not. And then, but I so I had so this was while I was at Kharagpur. I was looking for a PhD program, and with my GRE score, I was like, okay, this is not gonna work out. Then I joined IBM. I was there for year and a half, and it was very clear to me right from the start that this is not where I'll have my life. So that was a fun phase for me. I enjoyed a lot, but then I was also introspecting, where should I go? What would I like to do? And as it turns out, in Europe, um, the admission process is very different from in US. There, it's like finding a job. You have openings in different labs, and you essentially try to get in contact with the professors. Typically, you would then have an interview, and they will assess whether you are an appropriate candidate for the program and so on. So that's what happened to me. I was looking essentially into the fields that are related to bio-inspired engineering, something related to physics. And as luck would have it, I ended up in Switzerland.
Okay, okay. So great. How did you find the academic environment different from, let's say, from IIT India system, so-called best of the technical institution, and in Switzerland?
Yeah, so while I was doing my PhD, I was also doing some teaching assistantship as a TA, which you typically have to do. Um, so the reason I'm bringing that up is because my experience in India has been undergrad studies, and I think it's only fair to compare undergrad studies to undergrad studies. And so what I've noticed in Switzerland, in ETH in particular, was that the students who were studying a particular course or a particular discipline, they were doing that really because they wanted to do that discipline, not because this discipline would give them a job or because this is the most in field or something like that. At least that was my feeling, was that people were doing that purely because of love for that topic. And if I look at myself and how I ended up, and if I look at people around me in India, there's a lot of this decision that's driven by market, driven by which departments drive jobs and so on, which also means people are not necessarily studying things that they love to do. People are studying things that they know will get them a career. So that's, I think, a fundamental difference that I saw quite a lot from students here versus my own experience in India. Beyond that, There is also a feeling of a lot of pressure when it comes to studies in India. For example, it's all very clearly defined. You have to finish your 12th by a certain age. You cannot skip years. You have to finish your engineering in 4 years. And that is that. There is no such thing as engineering in 5 years. Um,
Right.
and here it is not the case at all. People take their own time. They do like, oh, I'm going to do an intermediate where I'm going to go do an internship somewhere. I'm going to go travel for a year and explore the world. So things are a little more relaxed and self-paced, I feel, which also I think gives a certain feeling of ease, and then perhaps that leads to better focus in studies. Um, that's maybe a couple of things that I find really contrasting. Everything else, quality of studies, I think the amount of things that we are taught in India are really very good quality. I think there's no comparison in that sense. I think we are very well in terms of syllabus. We're really in a good position. It's really more of a motivation of how to get the most out of what we have.
Okay, okay, wonderful. And as far as let's say, because overseas studies are are kind of expensive, if I can use the term venture. As far as Europe is concerned, what are the various opportunities which students, learners can get when they go for, let's say, even a research studies, or in case you got an opportunity to interact with people doing masters? What are the various opportunities available and how readily they are available?
Yeah, so as a PhD, almost all programs are fully funded, um, or at least you would only do it if it is funded. I've not seen anybody who's doing it out of the pocket or because they are doing some other jobs. At least at ETH and university, PhD positions are funded. Um, and I again, to the best of my understanding, that is the case everywhere in Europe, which means during a PhD, you're not really too worried about sustenance itself. And usually these salaries are mm, reasonably comfortable, that you're able to find a place to stay, you're able to support yourself. You might even be able to have a little bit of savings. Especially from a Indian background, like I never had any financial issues. As a master's student, that is not the case, but most countries in Europe have free education, which means the education itself is not the expense. Where you are required to support yourself is your housing, your food, and so on. There, I know people who do, tutoring. You could do a part-time job or an internship or a teaching assistantship. There's ample opportunities to be able to do some teaching at universities, or assist in a lab or do a project in some lab. And that's some of the ways you can support yourself as a master's student. As a PhD or a graduate or a postgraduate position, that's never an issue.
Okay,
I think
okay,
this is true also in US, if I'm not mistaken. Most graduate schools support you, and that
okay, okay.
includes typically the master's program as well, if you're in
Okay.
the
So similar
graduate
situation.
program.
Oh, okay, okay. Similar situation is there in the Europe. Um,
Yeah,
okay, okay. And as far as the language is concerned, language of instruction, is there any some kind of restriction, or maybe
that
let's say slight barrier?
that is definitely, I think, maybe the biggest barrier in Europe as opposed to US, because um, most universities at PhD level will be in English, at least in the STEM domain. So there, you're fairly secure. Your colleagues are also mostly international students, so you're typically completely shielded from anything to do with local language. Um, where it becomes more challenging is if you're doing a master's or a bachelor's program. There, most courses are still done in the local language. At least in Switzerland, at ETH, there's a lot of courses that are taught in German or Italian, some other language, not necessarily in English. And typically, you'll also see that the students are not most comfortable in English at that stage as yet. Everybody studies English, but that doesn't mean their mode of education is in English, right? So there's a little bit of discomfort there. And so when you, as a student from India, are going somewhere in Europe, you have to be sure that the program is actually tailored for somebody who can speak English and not local language. So that reduces the opportunities at a undergrad and master's level. And I think that's also true when it comes to cultural integration, because you come here, suddenly everything like is in a foreign language, and you have to figure out how to work through that. Grocery stores, talking with your landlord, all of that.
Okay.
So that, I think, in that sense, US is a lot smoother path into getting assimilated. Having said that, there's also a lot of student communities, Indian communities anywhere you go. And so you get a reasonable amount of support because of the community that you will find.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Given apart from, let's say, the regular day-to-day academic program, of course, at the research level, the availability of, let's say, labs and good equipments as well as resources is very important. So, how good is it in, let's say, Germany? Sorry, in Switzerland, comparatively, or maybe let's say Europe in general, in your
I
observation?
mean, my experience has been very stellar. Like, every lab is very well equipped. ETH in particular is a very prestigious university. I know the same is the case with University of Zurich, EPFL. They're all very, very well funded. The equipment is usually top notch. There is rarely any scarcity of the lab equipment or the necessary resources to run these things. And typically, when you get grants for a particular project, it is accompanied with a lot of the necessary equipment as well. I've seen things that I wouldn't have believed existed in the universities, but it's all very well funded, and that's something that you'll see, like, the latest technology is always there.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so I think in that sense, I think maybe that's where we see a big divide is the amount of economical support in order to have these lab facilities is at least from my experience at IITs, we had good labs. I wouldn't say they're not great, but the access to these labs is a lot better in my experience here than it is there.
Okay, okay. So I saw that apart from, let's say, after doing your PhD in Switzerland, you also did your postdoc at two places in US, Intel Labs
Yeah.
and then university, another university in US. So what led you to do it, and how was the experience? What was the drive for it? You did, I think, more than 4 years or so. You stayed in US.
Yeah. Yeah. So postdoc for me as was a phase of discovering myself and where I would fit. um, where because I had finished my PhD here, but then it wasn't clear to me if I wanted to pursue academics or if I wanted to pursue an industrial career. So I decided to initially do a postdoc at UCSD. It's in US where you have much more wider opportunities as a larger country, as a much wider academic net, and so on. So I went there at UCSD to a very renowned professor, a Professor Gert Kahnbergs, who is also a good colleague of my professor here at ETH, which is Professor Giacomo Indivari. So I went there. It was also my honeymoon phase because I had just gotten married. So I was there for a reasonable amount of time. During the first few years there, I also had a short internship at Intel. So it was a internship postdoc type scenario because there was a collaborative project with Intel. So I'd been there at Intel, and there it was really short. It was only 3 months, but um, those 3 months were very impactful in my life because I saw how research works at an industrial location as opposed to at a university. I also saw how the type of support, the camaraderie, the team effort that goes into research. And I really personally liked it. It could be because of my mentors that I had there at Intel, um, but I really enjoyed it. So at that point, it dawned on me that perhaps industrial career is more appropriate for me. And so from that point on, I'd been looking for different opportunities, and just so happens that the opportunity brought me back to Switzerland after.
Okay, okay. So and okay, so what? As I mentioned that I had been looking forward for this discussion. So your organization, you have been there for quite a while, almost 4 plus, almost 5 years or so.
It's more than 5 years, yeah.
Uh, yeah, more than 5 years. So what do you do since and in the AI area? What all you
Yeah.
all are doing? Whether it's hardware,
Yeah.
software, a combination of it. How is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sinsense happens to be a spin-off from the lab where I had done my PhD. So it's founded by my professor, Professor Indivari, and one of his postdocs, Dr. Ning Chao. So together, they founded this company as a way to commercialize some of the things we'd been working on in the lab. The particular domain is called neuromorphic engineering. It is a field of engineering that takes inspiration from neuroscience, how it studies how the brain works, and at some point they discovered some parallels between how transistors work to how cell membranes work. And what that allowed people to do is come up with very efficient circuits to mimic neurons. And so that means you can build very efficient neural networks that are brain like and can do computation that is also very similar to how brains work. The key terminology here is something called spiking neural networks. These are a slight variant of standard neural networks that we hear in artificial intelligence today. Um, but these enable you to do the types of computations that would be rather expensive when you do standard neural networks. And so the company Synsense itself is a chip design company that builds these neuromorphic chips. The broad agenda is that you're able to have AI for vision processing and audio processing, that you're able to run these AI devices using a small battery for several months, as opposed to what is done now, which is that you have your AI device, but typically you require internet and you require connectivity and power in order to have some AI applications from your device. So this incurs a lot of power and bandwidth and privacy concerns and so on. So the goal at Synsense is we design these devices that where your data is on the device, it's already doing all the computation on it, and it just gives you the output. And so that's what we've been doing. So my particular expertise there is we in the algorithms team we kind of inspire the architectures, the types of neural networks that need to go onto the chips, so that we build chips that are informed by the algorithms that go on it. So it's not completely general purpose CPUs. These are very custom neural network devices that are inspired and that are designed by what are the requirements of the computation, that which is what makes them very efficient. So my group, we develop these algorithms, we develop the architectures that should map efficiently to hardware. These are the two key focus in terms of the vision of the group itself.
Okay, okay, wonderful. So, what are a couple of application areas where they have been used, and are they being used in a specific geography itself, or what is the you can
Um,
say
so
region. Yeah.
at the moment, yeah, absolutely. At the moment, so we use that for vision processing. So we have a device called Spec, which has a vision sensor, and right next to the sensor, we have a processor as well. So it's all on one chip. With this, we are able to do things like vision processing, gesture recognition, or gaze recognition. So simple vision processing tasks where you see something, you're supposed to make a decision based on what you've seen. We typically use these for in-home monitoring, like old age homes, if somebody is falling down, or if there is an intruder, or we also use this for smart gesture recognition for a remote control. For example, if you have something in front of a TV or your monitor and you want to have gesture controlled applications. Another domain that we are actively seeking is the domain of toys, smart toys. Easy to use because you don't want to program them. Of course, as a child, you'd want them to be very interactive, and at the same time, you don't want these tethered by a cable simply because you want to run your AI. So those are a couple of domains that we are actively pursuing. And so we don't yet have large scale commercial products, but we are in contact with several of these companies and we are still working towards commercialization at large scale. We have at the moment a proof of concepts and interactions with our partners.
Oh, okay, okay, wonderful. So a couple of months ago, I was reading Sam Altman's, I would say, message or some interview wherein he talked about the the age of large language models in no more, and then there are going to be smaller kind of models which might be turned into different kind of AI systems. So you had mentioned that some tiny ML area where also you are working in. So is it related to that where the amount of data, the amount of maybe let's say training, which a AI system would require would be less, and of course then it will be less maybe let's say capital as well as power intensive. Or is it some such kind of thing which these systems would
So
do?
I would say tiny ML and large language models fall a little bit um, in the opposite spectrum in this AI domain.
Okay.
Simply because if we look at large language models, the intention or the basic idea is that these models have a very good understanding of the world around you. And then with that understanding, they're able to solve specific problems. And it's critical in these applications that they have a broader understanding than the very specific domain that you're interacting with. Which is why they have to have an understanding of language. They have to have an understanding of, especially if you're looking at multimodal models, then you have to have a good understanding of what images are, what is sound, and so on and so forth, so that they can make a very informed decision based on all the modalities that they're afforded. And that kind of also leads to very large model parameters.
Okay.
Ultimately, of course, there are several techniques to shrink these models down so that you're able to compress the knowledge you have in shorter form, but still they are expected to have a very broad domain of knowledge. TinyML, on the other hand, is very focused on a very specific task. So it's generalization versus being an expert in a very small domain. And in TinyML, you're not aspiring to solve every problem. It's really engineering for one particular problem, very precise, which means you shed a lot of the um, parameter space, memory, and so on that is not required because for this task you don't need it. So that's the technique that TinyML takes.
Okay. 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 Wonderful. So thank you for that explanation. What we have been seeing, even in the year 2023 as well as in 2024, in the beginning, because of advent of AI, a lot of jobs have been becoming redundant, and even a lot of I watch YouTube and even on LinkedIn, there are a lot of advertisement of organizations, companies training people on data science and AI. and the future, it looks a bit uncertain as far as maybe let's say choosing a particular kind of career, or maybe stream is concerned. So based on what you have seen so far, what do you see maybe on a broad level? What are a couple of key things which individuals should keep in mind while choosing a career option? And I see that it is not necessarily maybe let's say engineering stream of education which is going to get affected. There is a very widespread, I think, impact which AI is going to happen, going to cause. So based on your understanding, what do you see? Whether such kind of maybe let's say very specific kind of maybe areas would emerge where specific applications would become more prominent, or what are your thoughts on this? A couple of points
Yeah,
which individuals could choose while deciding a career, even no matter which domain they are in.
yeah. So I think it's so this fear of losing jobs is very. I think of this as calligraphy, the art of calligraphy, and how it impacts when you have a printing press and computers and so on. Yes, the number of people who are required to do these tasks will reduce dramatically. The experts still will remain as experts because they have the expert domain knowledge. But if you're not the expert, then you're definitely losing in this. And the same goes then for people who have expertise in various domains. And you've rightly pointed out that this is not now a matter of, oh, it's going to impact people in computers. This is impacting everybody in every domain. But I think the lesson to learn here is that the domains are not redundant. We just have better tools that are available in each of these domains. And I think the most important thing is to not abandon the domain, but really embrace the new tools that are available, so that you are ahead in this race where you are able to do the best possible. And this is true everywhere, because if you do that, then you're really taking advantage of everything that you have access to. This is true in medicine, where there's a lot of AI that's being used to really bring medicinal drug and cures and so on, really to a very um, cutting edge level now. And the same is true for legal documentations. Same is true for paper writing these days. People are complaining, oh, there's ChatGPT wrote this paper, but who cares? Like, it doesn't matter who wrote the paper if it has something novel to contribute. And that's where I think everybody has to upskill and recognize that these new tools are adding value, and it's not that you sit and complain, this thing is taking away, because it doesn't help anybody, right? Like, we have to recognize new tools, and this will keep going on. I think in every age we've had tools that made something redundant but are enabling something else. Like calculators definitely let us do a lot more math than we were able to otherwise. And if you just learn how to use it, then you're much better off. So I think the most important thing is to keep learning and not go, I've learned everything I have, because that's not the way to progress.
Okay, okay. So very beautifully put. So I echo your thoughts, and I have seen also in when I interact with people, and then even my learners when I teach them. So many of them are a bit apprehensive that okay, whether the content which they're generating has it been generated by ChatGPT, whether it will have any value of. So I echo the same thing. If it has some knowledge, of course, it should not be some garbage. When it has some knowledge value to add, it should be ChatGPT should be seen primarily as a tool. And I quite agree with your approach and thought process that of course what we were used to do, of course we have to reinvent it. And probably in case I can use a term, we are in the age of AI and it is going to stay. It is not something that people will do so-called narebaji and all, and then government will say, okay, we don't want to use it. It is going to
Yeah,
be there
exactly.
because it is, yeah, because it is going to facilitate a lot of things. And one, of course, a very important area you talked about medical, which country like, of course, India, if we leave aside the so-called metros, the far-flung areas, the rural areas, they do not have that very great access to medical services, facilities, even diagnosis. and that
Yeah,
is where maybe let's say technologies which could maybe let's say by powered by standalone maybe batteries etc., which could do a lot of wonders, and a lot of preventive even medical services could be brought to different regions of maybe the country, and of course India one part, of course Africa becomes another reason. So
yeah,
yes, I quite echo your thoughts. So rather than maybe being apprehensive, we should try to embrace in a positive way. And of course, as you rightly said, that when printing press came and then calligraphy came, of course, people became apprehensive. But the more planned transition one would have, the less, I would say, friction one would be having. So thank you for all those. So apart
yeah.
from, let's say, all your academic, etc., of course, you talked about that there are few Indian students bodies. So in case one has to, in a foreign, let's say, education environment, acclimatize and make most out of it, what are a couple of suggestions you would have for them?
Um, so before getting to any particular location, I would say try to see if there are Indian communities or student communities, because that helps you get started. Find somewhere to live, know where to find your groceries, because especially us as Indians, we have a particular taste, we have a particular grocery set, and we go to a regular store, we will not, at least initially, find anything that we think this is food that we eat. At least this was my personal experience. On the other hand, I would say, so that's an important thing, is to have somebody who can support you when you get there. And of course, if you have a network and you know somebody who's already there, that is the best thing always. So networking beats everything. So if you have a network, you know somebody, then you should definitely count on that. They will be your pillar of support for everything. If you don't have that, there's almost always student bodies, local um, groups that are, depending on the density, you might find groups of your state, your city, or it could just be a broader country group, but you'll find something or the other. um, Once you get there, I think it is very important, or this is my personal opinion, it might not be the case for everybody, but I think it's also important that you go outside of your comfort zone and actually embrace and try to get used to the local culture, understand how locally things work. What is the, if you come to Europe, it has its own set of customs, cultures, and it's very useful to kind of get into that environment and make friends with locals, understand the local language, make an effort to kind of, um, you might not like it, you might uh, find it not okay, but I think it's important that you at least are aware of it and understand the thought process behind it. You can of course always judge in the end whether you want to have that lifestyle or not, but I think it's important that you know what's going around, because that is important also to make networks, have a good network outside of your comfort zone, because who knows, tomorrow you might need a contact somewhere, and this is how you make contacts. If you have a small community, then it's going to be very hard to reach out to these contacts later. um, so student bodies, usually, sports clubs, for me, that's always been where I make the easiest contacts, because you always of course have your own labs or study groups and so on where you make friends, but I think that is typically a very constrained group where everybody's doing the same things you're doing. Sports bodies suddenly give you access to something that where people are doing completely different things. So you get an exposure to a very wide range of people. Maybe sports is what I do, but there's other cultural groups, um, and yeah, anything of this sort that is outside of your regular educational groups are very useful to make these connections.
Agreed, agreed. No, so and that's how me and Sadiq also met. So at IT, we were practicing martial arts. So we were karate practitioners. Now Sadiq has ventured into kung fu and other styles. So, and it is really admirable as participants who can, with whatever is available in the frame, you can see is still pretty fit. Uh,
Wow.
So sports and with my own personal experience, when I was in Paris, we were doing all these kayaking activities, etc., and then a couple of other sports activities which were involved. So across, you need not have a very high level of intelligence to get involved into that. You should have just first an intention and inclination to do it, and that also creates very good bonding. And so that is, I quite echo that thought that one should get out of their comfort zone. And networking, of course, we emphasize. Unfortunately, we are not taught that into undergrad in maybe engineering stream. But when we go out our comfort zone, of course, we realize the values, the importance people have in our lives. So thank you for sharing all that thoughts, Sadiq. So. Uh, uh, and everyone who are watching it, thank you for staying up till this end. I hope you all get an opportunity to get to know something from this interaction. And Europe, in my personal opinion, is a great study destination. Not just in Switzerland, I have been in France, and then we will have also people from Germany, and of course, UK is a very traditional, I would say, destination where Indians have been going a lot. But other countries also in Europe, they are quite good, and even the French president, who was a chief guest on this year Republic Day, he himself announced that they're anticipating or they are preparing or they are creating policies facilitating entry of Indian students in France, and they have a target of 30,000 in next couple of years. So from that perspective, also, it's going to be a very interesting and I would say enriching experience. A bit of and even the language barrier to some way it is getting bridged. So I don't think there is going to be too many problems on that front. And Europe, maybe I'm biased in my that opinion. Europe is a kind of multiple countries into a small geography. So you get to see a lot of variety, you experience a lot of things, and that
Yeah,
also further enriches one's experience. Yeah, you're saying something, sir.
yeah, I was just gonna say, typically when I introduce Europeans to India, I tell them India is like Europe. It's not like one country. And I think the flip side of it is, Europe is like the European Union is like India, where every state has their own little culture, but you have the freedom to move across and experience, and everything is really close. Public transportation is great. You can get, from country to country really fast, experience very cultural locations, a lot of history, great food. um, so yeah, absolutely, like you said, it's really great place to experience something different. I think we're all exposed to American culture because of the TV. We don't have that same exposure to European culture.
Europe. I agree, quite agree. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so
Okay,
definitely everybody should consider that as one of the options and not just US.
great. Okay, so thank you, Sadiq. Let me complete this live stream. And thank you everyone who joined us for this live stream.